Now, one thing I want you to do when you read the textbook is to not get overwhelmed. We really are having just certain age stages that we study. Emerging adulthood today happens to be one of those 8 stages that we're studying. And the stages really are a time period and have 3 chapters associated with them. Each chapter will look at a type of development, the biosocial development, the cognitive development, and the psychosocial development of each individual at each stage. So think of 3 chapters as being clumped together, although they'll have a slightly different perspective that they take on what this development is actually about. When he was at Mizzou in the 1990s, Dr. Jeffrey James Arnett started noticing that the college students he saw seemed to be in a really different stage than one that he had experienced growing up, and those that his parents and grandparents experienced growing up. In the process of looking at this over several years, he came to conclude that this was a unique stage that actually was going to be here to stay. And he called it emerging adulthood because there's a time of life between high school graduation and around age 25 when we're kind of in a state of limbo, not adolescents at all anymore, and yet not completely adults either. And by that he meant really we're not functioning with autonomy and a plan for the future that involved being autonomous, establishing a family, establishing a career, those kinds of things. And so this came to be recognized in a book he wrote in 2004, and since then has pretty much been gaining favor throughout the world, this period of emerging adulthood. And in our 7th edition, this very edition of our textbook, you'll see emerging adulthood come up for the very first time, in fact. What a time period of our life. This emerging adulthood years from high school graduation until about 25 to even some people say 30 are among the healthiest natural years of our life. We have very few chronic illnesses, and in fact most of what we suffer from happens to be things that we catch, like a virus or a cold, and or accidents that we're in. And so we have muscles that tear or bones that break. And that makes this a really strong, engaged, nothing can ever go wrong with me experience of my life, which is actually wonderful and a little unrealistic in the long term, because these are times when it's good to start thinking in terms of how to prolong health by maintaining good health habits now. So this is a time when our muscle body mass, our skeletal muscle mass is at its peak, where we have a great organ reserve, our heart capacity, our lung capacity. We're operating sort of like a bank account. Think of reserve as an account where if we are stressing ourselves, let's say we're running a marathon, that we can endure, that we have the capacity to endure through this length of time. And so these are the things that occur naturally at this time period. These 2 things help us maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is that sense of balance, that if we're required all of a sudden to do some sort of sprint, our muscles and our heart can increase in capacity and functioning in order to make that sprint happen, and then calm back down quickly and efficiently. That's homeostasis, so that we get back to sort of even keel. That's what homeostasis is. It's sort of being in that even keel place. And all of this exists at its peak of functioning in our emerging adulthood years, to begin that slow deterioration, if we don't keep things up, starting in our 30s.